Hello, welcome back to another video on speculating. I haven't done a video on this topic in a while. No doubt the influences of pop culture today into the hobby is undeniable. Okay, we all know what happened to the first appearances of many characters, regardless if they are B level, C level, or D level. The moment that they show up on a TV show like Arrow, there are a mania on eBay about the books that they first appear in. So pop culture has played a huge part in the speculation market as far as today. But through my research over the past few months on the history of speculating in the hobby, I learned a lot of new interesting things. For sure, one recent thing that I read that I thought was very interesting is the change in mentality of the typical collectors in the 80s on what was important, does drive up the values of a lot of keys and first appearance in the 80s and onward. I read somewhere that, you know, let's step back a little bit. Collecting in the 60s and 70s, I think for most collectors back then, I can only guess since I did not start collecting until 1981, but I'm guessing for those that collect in the 60s and 70s, it is more about being a completist, more about collecting the entire series of a title. And sure, they will search out Golden Age books here and there and drive up the value of Golden Age book, but for the most part, the keys are mostly, the obvious big keys like Batman 1 or Action 1 or Detective 27. Those were well known even in the 60s and 70s, but for the rest of the other stuff, outside of the Silver Age keys, I don't think the hobby was that focused in keys and first appearances. And I read somewhere that starting in the 80s, where there were a lot of migration of collectors from other hobbies, specifically baseball card collecting, into the comic book collecting community, that emphasis on first appearances across many books start to have more emphasis, and the value on them start to rise faster, because baseball card collectors has always put much more emphasis on the rookie cards. Thus, when they migrate over to collecting comic books, they naturally start to search out and seek first appearances of many of the characters, thus driving up the demand and value of the first appearances and keys of all characters, even the B and the C and the D list. Not as much as what pop culture has done today, but certainly in the 80s onward, that's have been the influences that drive the focus into keys and first appearances collecting. So that was an interesting theories, and I'm sure there's some merit to that. So I went back into my stack of a price guide, and sure enough, looking through, this is 1974, this is 1980. looking through these two early price guide taught me a lot, because you know, as I have learned so far, is that the price guide does reflect the general market pretty closely. So if you look through, if anyone have access to these things and look through them, one thing that you will notice right away is in the 70s and even to the early 80s, you know, there are very little emphasis on first appearances. You know, you can flip through these books. For example, you know, if you flip through this book and this book and look up, say, a well-known key today, say Batman 121, the first appearance of Mr. Freeze, you will not see any mention of Mr. Freeze in these two price guide. Okay, so I can't find my price guide from 1989. If I could find that one of these days, I would take a look to see if Mr. Freeze is mentioned in the price guide. But as far as 1980, it was not. And even for something like, say, Thanos, Iron Man 55, okay? If you look in under Iron Man 55, it mentioned that only drawn by Jim Starlin. Okay, it for sure in the early 70s through the early 80s, if there was notes, little notes on the books, often it is more about the artist, you know, compared to the character. So there was a time where the authors have a big, I guess, influences on the fan, and they seek out the artist more than the character in the book. Not so today. You know, people still care about the artist, but more emphasis is on the key first appearances. So I thought that was interesting that in 1980, even Thanos was not important enough to footnote in the price guide, nor was Mr. Freeze. And to make it even more interesting, I dig even to a newer price guide I have, which is this book here. It is 2008. When I returned to the hobby in 2008, 2009, I went out there and grabbed an used copy. So this is the 38th edition. This is one of those used books that was sold on eBay. That was an old library copy. I bought this, I think, in 2009. So I flipped through it real quick just to see. And interesting, you know, with the movie hype, Avengers movie hype, with Ultron, you know, anyone is well aware of Avenger 55, right? His first appearance of Ultron, 54, 55. Guess what? Even in 2008, it is not noted. Okay, Avenger 55 have no special mentioning whatsoever. That shows you how pop culture influences the collectors out there, as far as, you know, what they are seeking, and how they drive up the value of the books. Because even in 2008, Ultron was not even worth mentioning. Interesting, right? Who knows what the speculating market is going to be like in the next few years. You know, certainly it has surprised me to this point. You know, I thought for sure the speculation phase will get tired in the last few months, but with the upcoming new shows with Marvel, it's like I said, I don't participate in the speculation. I certainly don't buy and sell the hot books. I have many of the hot books, thankfully, because I bought many of these books a long, long time ago. So thankfully, I didn't have to pay up to have them. So I'm not in the market to buy them or flip them. So all I can do is sit back and watch the mania, and it's kind of fun, no doubt. I think it's kind of fun to watch the craziness, the mania on eBay with all the first appearances, especially when the character appear on a TV show. Certainly, it's like a train wreck. You can't help but watch it. Anyhow, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.